about using a knife safely and why I wanted you to use this safety knife for this first time is for what we're about to do. So anytime we're going to cut, your knife is going to be in your right hand. You're going to hold it with your thumb on the inside part and your index finger on the top, okay? And then the hand that you are not cutting with, the hand that you don't have the knife in, I want you to close in your fingers like this. I call this a bear claw. What this bear claw is going to do is it's going to allow you to hold on to whatever you're cutting in a really safe way. And when your knife comes up against your fingers, it's going to hit against your knuckles and it's going to protect your fingers from this part of the blade ever coming in contact with them, right? So we're holding our knife the correct way. We have our bear claw for our garlic. And the first thing we're gonna do is cut the very tip of the garlic off. It has where the root would grow at the top, and that doesn't taste very good. So we're just gonna set that aside, and then we're going to repeat that process. We're going to slice our garlic as thin as you can. It's okay if they don't all look the same. One of the things that we're going to learn is we're going to learn to be flexible in cooking, and we're going to learn to practice. So when you're outside of cooking class, maybe that looks like, you know, coming into the kitchen at mealtime and saying, can I help you chop something, so that you can practice these skills outside of class time. Really efficient. It allows you to do a lot of work, and I call it the kind of rock and roll. So you're going to hold your knife the same way we did the last time, but you're going to put your other hand over the top of it, and you're going to kind of rock and roll it over whatever you're cutting. So you're going to hold your knife like you did when we first started slicing the garlic, and then you're going to put your palm on the end of your knife, and you're going to rock back and forth. And as you get kind of used to what this movement is like, you'll go faster. And things kind of spread out as you're doing it, so just use your knife to scrape everything back into an area you can keep working. We want to make sure and cut this really fine because nobody ever wants a whole huge piece of garlic in their mouth. So we want to make sure that we're trying to cut it into as small pieces as possible. Something that's going to help us is we're going to use a little bit of salt. So you might have a salt shaker. This is one of those things where this is the cooking part that's less science and a little more our flavor, but we're using it as a technique. So I have this much salt on my palm. If you do want to use a measuring spoon, it's a little less than 1/4 teaspoon. And I'm going to sprinkle it over my garlic that I'm chopping. And what's going to happen is the salt is going to help me because the salt is gritty. It's going to almost act like a sort of sandpaper that rubs up against the garlic to make it nice and smooth, so that we get a good garlic flavor in the entire compound butter, but you're not just tasting garlic. And it will also help us add flavor. So I'm going to go ahead and put garlic into the butter. Let's see, let's go ahead and move to our herbs. I'm going to grab 2 pieces of basil, and I'm just pinching them off the top of my plant. What I'm going to do before I cut it is I'm going to put them on top of each other, and then I'm going to roll them in. When I chop them, remember you want to use your bear claw to kind of hold on to them. What's going to happen is when we slice, we're going to get these beautiful ribbons of basil to put in our recipe. So there's our basil. I don't like to cut it a lot more than that because what's going to happen is you're going to bruise it, and the oils that are across the entire leaf will kind of make it taste bitter, and it'll change the color. Instead of being this beautiful bright green, it'll get kind of dark and slimy. So you don't want to cut it down much more than this. For our thyme, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pinch off with our fingernails a little stem of thyme, and you want to remove the leaves from the stem. So we'll just be using the leaves. Once you have those pinched off, we are going to repeat the process that we did with the garlic just a little bit and just kind of rock over them to cut them into a little bit of smaller pieces. And you can do this with this herb because it's a little less acidic than the basil. So it will still taste good if you chop it up. So since we're only using part of this lemon, I want to wipe off our knife because we don't know if the next thing we're using the lemon for is salty or sweet, and you don't want it to taste like garlic if you're doing something sweet. And I'm going to use my towel to kind of wipe this off. You still have to wash this afterwards, by the way. But we're going to flip it over because it has all this kind of garlic oil on there. So we're going to flip it over, use the other side, and then put your lemon on, do your bear claw, make sure you're holding your knife correctly, and start sawing down the middle. Okay. So we have our lemon. When I'm squeezing lemon, I like to put my hand under it so that if any seeds fall out, I catch them in my hand. So we're gonna squeeze it. You probably only need one squeeze, and then you're gonna set it aside. You can wipe your hands on your apron or your towel. And then we're going to start mixing all of these things together. See, and this is a recipe. You can put this on toast to have like a nice kind of bougie toast. You can also use this in pasta sauce, either add it directly to your pasta, or even if you were making some pasta, you could take a little bit of this butter, add a little bit of cheese to it, and mix it together with your pasta as the pasta sauce that you're using. Or just drop little bits of it in soups or stews to add just a nice flavor. Okay, so this is getting pretty good. The last thing I'm going to do, because we're using unsalted butter, is I'm going to add a little bit of salt to balance out all the flavors. Last summer, we talked about salt almost like a stereo where you turn up the volume or you turn down the volume. You want your salt to be at about this level of volume, if that's the analogy that we're using. You don't want your salt to be so loud that that's the only thing you can taste, right? When you taste salt in something, you don't want the salt to be what you taste. You want to be able to say, oh, I feel like I can taste the basil and a little bit of the garlic, and I get a nice creaminess from the butter. You want it to be nice and balanced because that's what salt does to our food. Salt makes our food taste more like itself. So if you slice a tomato in half, this was one of my favorite snacks growing up. Just slice a tomato and sprinkle a little bit of salt on top. It tastes so good because two things happen. One is science and one is flavor. The first thing that the salt does is that it kind of releases some of the liquid from the tomato. Tomatoes are like 90% water, okay? So when that water leaves, the flavor is a lot more concentrated in the tomato, and the salt is kind of elevating that. So the salt is creating flavor within the tomato. So we want to make sure as we're salting in class that we're doing not too much, definitely, but not too little. When you taste something and you put it in your mouth, I kind of almost want you to have an instant reaction of closing your eyes and saying, that's good, right? That's my measure of when something is done, okay? So I want you to start with your 1/4 teaspoon and add that in, and then we're gonna taste it. And we're going to see, okay, does that taste good to me? Can I taste everything well in balance? And if you can't, then we'll add a little bit more, okay? So we measure it out, add it in, and mix it nice and smooth to try to get those salt particles everywhere. It might mean you have to kind of scoop some butter that's accumulated on your spoon, but we'll smooth it out. And then in most kitchens, when you're tasting things, you taste them from the palm of your hand because that part doesn't touch food directly. So on the top part, I want you to put a little bit of butter and taste it. Mine, I can taste the garlic really well, and it tastes pretty lemony. So I'm gonna add just a little bit more salt to balance that. But the nice thing about our herbs is because we cut them a little bit, they're releasing their oils into the butter. So even if when you try the butter, you don't have a little bit of the herb on there, you're still tasting it because it's basically becoming one with the butter. So I'm gonna grab probably just about 1/2 teaspoon and sprinkle that in, and we'll do this again. Okay, so let's do a second taste. Yep, that's right. It's my favorite part, and I got a little bit of a head start, so I already did part of it without you. But you want to make sure and spread some butter on your little toasts, okay? And remember, 1 bite rule. You don't have to love it, but I want you to try at least 1 bite. And then you have a little bit left over, so you can use it throughout the week. Check in with a parent or guardian. Maybe you can have an Italian night and use it on garlic bread and put it in the oven with a little bit of cheese, or you can use it in pasta like we talked about. So spread it on, take a bite. Please make sure to clean up your surroundings. Whatever you use should be clean and put away after you've used it. Leave the kitchen as clean or in a better state than you found it in. And make sure to check in with your parent or guardian about what you're allowed to use in your kitchen and what those boundaries and guidelines should look like for you. And I'll check. See you next week.